Good day, collectors and viewers. Social Distance Warrior is back, and today we're going to look at Grand Admiral Thrawn. So, Grand Admiral Thrawn is an interesting character. Of course, every single time if you watch one of these videos that I have when I talk about the original Star Wars figures, I always talk about the dark times when Star Wars went dormant. It was like a volcano. Movies stopped. No more animated stuff after 1985, and then obviously no multimedia stuff. Star Wars goes dormant, and Star Wars would stay dormant and nostalgic for anybody like myself and you guys, whoever's passionate about Star Wars that grew up with it at the time, and you crave for anything that was Star Wars. So if they made a VHS release of the movies, you'd pick them up. You'd look for any avenue, obviously, to try and keep that nostalgia going, whether it was the Marvel comics at the time, because there was a lot of them. Of course, those were discontinued as well in the 80s. And Star Wars would make a triumphant return in the early 90s. My first introduction with Star Wars in the 90s, when they came back, I was an avid comic book fan. And of course, I was into the Dark Horse comics, the Dark Empire ones. And I wasn't a really big novel reader, but a friend of mine was, and that friend of mine introduced me to, he goes, "You know about the Star Wars novel that's out?" I said, "No, what's the Star Wars novel about?" And he said, "Well, it's a continuation of after Return of the Jedi." And I'm like, "No way. What's it called?" And he's like, "It's called Heir to the Empire." And of course, I forced myself into the novel, into the novel game, because I craved more Star Wars. And the novel was amazing. Of course, it continued after Return of the Jedi. I believe it was 5 years later. And this is where that whole nostalgia comes now, especially through the modern day stuff that's touching up on post Return of the Jedi stuff. But this is where we get our first introduction to Grand Admiral Thrawn. It was part of that, it's called now the Thrawn trilogy, but those Heir to the Empire novels is where he was introduced and got a really big fan base. And Star Wars, of course, made its return into the Power of the Force 2 line, and Hasbro was paying attention, and we'd get a Grand Admiral Thrawn figure in an expanded universe wave, and that would be our first introduction. So that was in 1998, and these figures were really interesting. They were kind of separate from the wave, and I'm up here in Canada, so getting my hands on one of these figures was very tricky. They weren't in retail stores up here. Retail stores only carry the movie stuff. But thankfully, any kind of specialty store or comic book store had a chance of getting these figures there. And of course, I was lucky and I found mine at a specialty store. And Grand Admiral Thrawn, of course, his card back is interesting as well. The Expanded Universe figures came with these 3D backdrop card backs, which are amazing, great for display. Anything coming out like this today would probably cost you an extra $20 just because it's a piece of cardboard. But back then in the 90s, that was a selling feature. These characters weren't in the movies, and of course the toy companies were concerned if they'd be difficult to sell or not. So let's have a look at the figure, and we'll have a look at the card back as well. So Grand Admiral Thrawn, of course, 1998, Power of the Force 2. That's this guy over here. Let's bring him up over here into the camera. And we can see that he has that, standard modern pose, or the figures from the Power of the Force 2. Thankfully, he wasn't as beefy as the characters that came out a couple years before. Mine isn't very blue in the skin. He's a species called Chiss. Hopefully, I'm not butchering that name. But you can see he's got the red eyes there. The paint job is really good for a character at the time. I would have liked if his skin was a little more blue. He looks more like a vampire than he does an alien species. But again, an interesting character. And you see him in the white Imperial outfit, that he's got on there. Of course, only a few characters that we know in the Star Wars movies wear the white outfit. He's an admiral. And he's got this interesting creature around his neck over here. He also comes with that creature, and it is removable. And that's called I'm going to again butcher the name here, Ysalamiri. Now, that's interesting about this creature. Of course, he has that in the novels, and he does have that with him at all times through the comic books. It's an alien creature that it's like a pet of his, but its biggest reason for sitting around his neck there is that it blocks the Force. So no one can use any, Jedi mind tricks or of that nature on him when he's got this creature on. So he's well prepared to deal with any Force-sensitive rebels or enemies. So that's the little creature that he comes with. We'll go put that aside. You can see it's got a nice alien feature to it there with the 4 eyes on there, and he's almost like kind of like a worm, squirrel-like creature. As far as Grand Admiral Thrawn, that's him in his presence over there. You can see he's got his badges over here. Now that's almost like a standard Imperial body. He does have white gloves on here, so he doesn't have any skin showing on his hands there. He does come with a blaster. What was neat about these guys is they kind of came with unique blasters. I'm pretty sure his is unique to this figure. Yeah, they would all go all out on these expanded universe figures, and they'd have their own accessories and such. Even though they're one-off figures, it wasn't about how can we reuse this stuff in the future. It was like, let's make this character as accurate as possible to the way he appeared in the novels and the comic books. So that's his blaster there. As far as the character himself, let's take a nice close-up view of him there. A standard pose. Of course, I'm a sucker for these standard poses where they're not exaggerated and they're not in action poses. This is the way I remember my figures growing up, and this is the way I love to see them and display them on the shelves. As far as head articulation, you can turn his head, of course, side to side on there. Arm articulation, they go up and down. That's standard stuff. Okay, he does have waist articulation there. He's got a nice painted gold buckle on his belt there. He does turn side to side at the waist there. And of course, articulation from the legs down, standard stuff. Leg moves up all the way that way, and that works the same on both sides. Okay. We take a look at underneath, and we can see he's got little foot pegs on there. And if we take a close gander, one foot says 1998 LFL Lucasfilm Limited. The other foot says Canada, China on the bottom. So one more look at Grand Admiral Thrawn there from the front. Let's take a look at him from the side. Okay, you can see he stands up well. He stands up well in the collection, and that's what he looks like from the back. I'm pretty sure he's got a very similar body, if not the same body, as Grand Moff Tarkin. It's very, very similar. It's very reminiscent to me of that body, that figure, and I'm fine with that. Nice black boots. But that's our very first introduction to Grand Admiral Thrawn. I'm just going to put him away for 1 second. I want to show you the backdrop. So the backdrop that he comes with over here is right out of his card back. This will be interesting if you've never seen this before. You can see it's a 3D backdrop, and you can see how it's put together. It's glued together on the sides there, and it's supposed to be, you know, the inside of the bridge of his ship. And they've detailed it nicely even on the bottom part there. There's some elevations. You can have somebody standing up there. It's a little flimsy if you keep somebody up there for a long time. But if you put something underneath here, I'm sure you can balance that weight. So you're looking out the space window. If we turn that up to the bottom here, you can see that's the card back of Grand Admiral Thrawn with a nice little description there. Yes, and it is 5 years after the Battle of Endor. And there's the other figures that were available. There's a Luke there, Kyle Katarn, Princess Leia, Thrawn, Mara Jade, Clone Emperor, a Space Trooper, and an Imperial Sentinel, and of course a few vehicles. Now these vehicles aren't really expanded universe, they're more concept stuff of the Cloud Car and the Snowspeeder. And then down here you can see these two little tabs that I pressed in. Those are the tabs that hold this card back nicely out so it doesn't fold back in. That's what it looks like there from the side. And then of course if we turn around to the other side, that's the front of the card back from Grand Admiral Thrawn. You can see it's advertised there with 3D play scene. So an awesome little feature there. And if you collect these guys or you're interested in Grand Admiral Thrawn, this would look nice on the shelf sitting there, even though it's like a cartoon or a comic book depiction there. It looks really nice. The vibrant blue makes it stand out well, and it goes really well with our Grand Admiral Thrawn figure. Let's put his Ysalamiri back on his shoulder. And let's put his blaster back in hand. And then we're going to display him nicely in his little backdrop there so he can conquer the galaxy. Okay. So we have to fast forward 10 years. We jump all the way up to 2008. And Hasbro, of course, they were updating and getting much better at sculpting. And us fans were clamoring for everything that wasn't in the movies, that was expanded universe. Anything Star Wars would sell. And they introduced comic packs. And in comic packs, they would give us figures that wouldn't be maybe warranted on a single release, but opportunity on a comic pack to give us stuff that we normally wouldn't get. And we got a brand new Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he'd come with a pack and figure with him, Talon card. And of course, this is from the Heir to the Empire series, but again, a modern representation of that character. And that's this guy over here. And we jump 10 years and we can see just how far we've come sculpt-wise from that original figure. Let me just take that foot peg stand off. So there's our brand new version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. Again, brand new sculpt there. And we're noticing little differences on here. Of course, he's going to have added articulation and a little bit more of a realistic feel to him. His hands don't have gloves on. You can actually see the skin hands on there. You can see his big, bright red eyes. And of course, he does have that creature, the Salamiri, on his shoulder there again. So a little more detail on that one as well. We're going to take him off to have a closer look at him. And this one's a little bit more detailed. He's got feet this time around, and he doesn't have the 4 eyes. He just has the 2 eyes on there. But you can see he's detailed nicely, and it's a nice addition to the collection. He definitely looks like a creature add, and he's got a really interesting texture to him. His paint job isn't smooth. It's more of a rough paint job. It kind of almost feels furry with the way they've sculpted that, but he's sculpted. He can sit, right on the shoulders of Grand Admiral Thrawn, or you can have him on the ground, or maybe in part of your cantina or any other setup that you have for these characters. Let's put him back there temporarily there so we can look at him. Let's have a look at the figure himself. So the figure himself, again, we've seen a big update here from 10 years previous. The head's on a ball joint. We're going to take a look at his head sculpt all the way around. I love that he's got a very serious, menacing looking stare with those red eyes. Looking very serious and obviously very important in our Imperial Army over here, especially post Return of the Jedi. So full movement there. Again, head's on a ball, so you can do a lot with that. You can have him looking down slightly. You can have him looking up. But again, you can swap that, pull it off if you needed to. You can see his neck is painted blue there as well. As far as articulation over here at the shoulders, he does have a ball joint there, so arm can go all the way up, all the way around. Full movement there. Same thing goes at the elbow. You have movement there. And of course, over here at the hands, you can turn him side to side. As we work our way down over here at the waist, you can see we can turn him side to side there at the waist. No movement back and forth. He does have his, Imperial jacket that comes down. It goes over his legs there, so it gets in the way of you having the ability to move his legs. They didn't put a slit, which kind of sucks. You're kind of stuck having him only standing, but we've basically only ever seen him standing, so you're okay in that instance. As far as articulation down past the leg there, you can bend him at the knee there. He does have knee articulation. Again, it doesn't really come in handy that much because you can't move his leg. It's just there. And then if we work our way down the boot here to the ankle, you can see the ankle does have ankle articulation, and it's not painted on the inside there. So that is a little bit of a deterrent, but again, gives you some motion on there, and it's nice to see how far these action figures have come. If we turn him underneath, we'll notice he does have his foot pegs there underneath, no writing on the bottom, but detailed boots with heels there. Okay, one more look at Grand Admiral Thrawn from the front, and then that's what he looks like from the side. And then we'll take a gander here at the back as well. You can see he's got that nice vibrant white outfit, and then of course on his legs here on the back it'll say the year he was made, and one leg says 2008 there on the thigh, the other one says Hasbro China on the other one there. So that's our Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Legacy Collection comic pack. Alright, so it'll be a number of years later before we revisit this Grand Admiral Thrawn character. Star Wars, of course, would go through the vintage collection. Obviously, the movies are done. We'd have the Clone Wars. And George Lucas would surprise us all and sell Star Wars, the company Lucasfilm Limited, to Disney in 2012. And when Disney took over, of course, one thing that they did is they did away with the expanded universe. So they took our beloved expanded universe and they said, the only thing that's going to be relevant is what you've seen in the movies. We're going to create the future here. And I think the biggest thing that they were trying to do there is try to change everything up, especially with the comic books. So we get a special interruption here. We got a visitor that wanted to interrupt the video and be a part of it. Beaker, say hi. So slowly we'd get our expanded universe lore back and introduced in the Disney Star Wars universe as well. They would put together a new animated show called Rebels, and by the time they reached season 3, we all of a sudden started to get familiar characters back into the line. And this time, Grand Admiral Thrawn made his triumphant debut, this time in animated form, and again, now becoming part of the lore with the Disney Star Wars era. And that's this character over here that we have. Now, this is the Rebels version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. This was a figure that came out in 2017. On the card back here, you can see the Death Trooper. Now, this is from Rogue One. So this is the Rogue One artwork, and this is the depiction of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So a nice card back there. They came with these little gimmicky weapons that weren't part of the movies, but they added play value for the kids. To pick up the characters, you can see the nice little animated version picture of Grand Admiral Thrawn over here on the side. And if we turn that card back around, we can have a look on the back. You can see a nice little, description here on Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Rebels series. And of course, there was these gimmicks that these characters came with where you could make these action poses or moves or effects with your characters. They didn't last very long, but they came out with codes and every single character to download the Studio Effects app. So again, some gimmicks that came out, but again, gimmicks are fun. It's nice when you get stuff with your character, not just a bland character. So that's some of the stuff that would happen pre-Vintage Collection stuff before it came back. So that is the Grand Admiral Thrawn. We're going to take a look at him in loose form in one sec. So here's the Rogue One release or Rebels version of Grand Admiral Thrawn that was released in 2017. Here he is out of card. You can see he does have that animated look and animated feel to him of the characters. The paint work on these characters done really, really well. I'm going to bring him up close so you can take a nice close-up look of his head sculpt there. But he definitely looks awesome. Like you can see in there, he does have the red eyes. If I can get that nicely positioned for you there. And you can look inside the eye. It does have black pupils as well. So they managed to paint the pupils, and his eyebrows are amazing. Like the paint work on these characters came a long way. The sculpting, of course, leaves a little bit more to be desired, particularly since they were making the regular line Star Wars stuff in the late 2000s, and they were making a whole line of Clone Wars figures, and the Clone Wars figures were all super articulated as well. So it's kind of a little bit disappointing that they're not that way, but it was great to finally get this character on release again, so more fans could get their hands on it. You can see the head sculpt all the way around, how awesome it looks. He's got that interesting receding hairline there running around the back, and he's got a really nice defining look. Now, his head does move side to side, and there is a bit of play on there because the head is separate from the neck, so maybe it is on a ball joint, but I'm not going to attempt to take mine off. There's no reason to. I'm not really going to put that figure in any other position or any other display. You can see the nice badges here on the front, the gold plates here on top of his outfit, paint job there. As far as articulation, you do see his arms do move up and down, so just standard articulation there, nothing else. His hands are painted on here, same skin color as his head, so the figure does look awesome. He does have a holster here on the side, so the figures that were coming out at the time, they all had working features, just not enough articulation. And of course, he's got his gun that comes out of the holster, and it is in animated form, so no painting on there, and it's very small. But you do have a spot to put his pistol there on the side, and that's painted well, it sits well. As far as his jacket here, it comes down over his legs, so again, you don't have that option to move his legs in any kind of a sitting pose. You're restricted. There is a slit here in the back, but again, it doesn't do much. You can't really move his legs. You can't really have him in sitting pose. No articulation, of course, here at the knees, but you can see the boots are painted nice there at the bottom. And let's take a look at him there from the front and lift him up underneath. You can see he does have his foot pegs, and I'll try to make out what it says here. It's a little more difficult on black. One of them does say Hasbro China. The other one does say the year. Or does it? I can't really make out the year on the bottom there, but I can definitely tell you that it was 2017. So one more look at him from the front, and then one look at him here from the side, and then another look at him from the back there. So he definitely has that animated look, tall and slim, but just as menacing as he was in the show, and just as menacing as we remember him from the novels, and of course the Dark Horse comics as well. So Grand Admiral Thrawn from Rebels. All right, so the Vintage Collection would come back in 2019 to everybody's rejoice, and we started to clamor for more figures. And Vintage Collection finally, we had to wait 5 years, but we finally got a brand new, super articulated, more realistic, modern version of Grand Admiral Thrawn, especially because he was popular in the Rebels show, and we also got wind that he was going to be in the new Ahsoka TV show in live action form, and Hasbro came through and gave us a brand new figure in 2023. So here he is on card back over here. Let's bring that over here to the forefront. And we can see on the card back itself, it says Star Wars Rebels, Grand Admiral Thrawn, and it's got a nice picture of him there from the show. I would have preferred the picture of the card art, you know, maybe just because I'm more of an old schooler. I would have preferred that to be the heir to the Empire, because that was his debut. I think the character, like the likeness of this figure, is not so much in tune with the show. It's a more realistic version. It's more in line with what the heir to the Empire, Timothy Zahn novels would be. And but again, I'm not complaining. I'd like to have a new figure. Just that's what I would have preferred for the card back, as opposed to it saying Rebels. I would have preferred it to be a heir to the Empire version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. But there he is on card back. You can see it looks really nice there on the card back. The card back image is nice from the show. And we look here in the bubble, we can see our brand new version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. He does come with his blaster pistol accessory. He's got the nice red backdrop. You can see the nice red name pill there as well. And let's take a look at the back as well. We take a look at the back. We'll notice it's VC number 296. And there's some other figures that were released as well at the time. And you can start to notice that some of these figures appeared in Ahsoka. And this is why this character was very needed at the time to coincide with the release of that show. So that's our Grand Admiral Thrawn. And we're going to take a look at him, of course, in loose form as well. And that's this character over here. The figure is here. I'm just going to pull him off of his foot pegs. Bear with me for 1 sec. There we go. So super articulated form. So one thing that we got excited about right off the bat with this character, and why we were anticipating a release of him, is because they made a new Imperial body. Moff Jerjerrod and Admiral Piet were the two figures that got it first, but they made a new Imperial body, and we were waiting for Hasbro to go nuts and give us a whole bunch of different figures. And Grand Admiral Thrawn is the recipient of one of those figures, as was Director Krennic, as was the Imperial 4-pack that they've made as well. So they've utilized this body, which is great. It's an awesome new sculpt. Let's take a look at his head sculpt up close here. Again, you can see, I know they make realistic versions of these characters in the Vintage Collection line, but as opposed to that Rebels, card back on there, it would have been nice to have it as an heir to the Empire card back, but then they would have to acknowledge the expanded universe. So maybe that's why they haven't done it, the old expanded universe anyway. So you can see the nice head sculpt there. The eyes are tiny, but it does have the little black pupil in the eye there as well. And of course, he's frowning or concentrating. You can see the nice eyebrows that he's got on, and then the way his skin is bent downward there as he's concentrating, probably thinking about how he's going to take over the galaxy and take out the Rebels. Got the nice little sideburns there from the side over the ears, and then that's what his head looks like at the back. It is on a ball joint, so you have full movement there. Again, you can move his head up. He can be looking upwards. He can be looking downwards as well. A lot more articulation than we're used to in the past. He does have the two little gold, shoulder pads on top there, like the Rebels figures had. And of course, the badging here on the front and the two little silver pens on the sides there. As we look at the figure here as well, you'll notice that he does have his working holster over here. We'll look at that in a second, because the Director Krennic one, of course, who has his gun facing the opposite way, this one's positioned the correct way. So I love that attention to detail from Hasbro. Articulation here at the shoulders, ball joint. You can move that all the way up. You can turn it around. You have elbow articulation there as well, full elbow articulation. And of course, you have it here at the wrist. And the wrist does have articulation. You can see it in there as well, where you can motion that downward, upward a little bit, not if it's not getting in the way of that sleeve on his arm there. But again, full articulation on the character. As far as articulation here at the waist, you can turn him side to side. And of course, he does have a crunch. You can go forward a little bit, and you can go backward a little bit on Grand Admiral Thrawn there as well. So we'll put his arm down there for a sec. I just want to show you the blaster. Let's just pull that out, see how that works. So you can see, again, it's more of the animated version of that blaster. So they're paying homage to that. But again, you can pose this guy with your realistic characters on the shelf as well. He stands in very well. So as we work our way down the jacket part over here, he does have the 2 slits on the side here to give you extra leg movement. You can see it on this side. You can see it on that side there. Okay. When you try to move his legs up though, you can see that the holster does get in the way. So even though this is a softer plastic, there's only so much you can do. You can kind of sit him if you had to, but you can definitely pose him with his legs stretched out or action pose or whatnot with your Thrawn character. As we work our way down over here at the knees, he does have knee articulation. He does have a ball joint there at the hip as well, just so you can see underneath there. So you can move his legs all the way out. We can bend him here at the knees very easily. And of course, as we work our way down the boot, he does have ankle articulation there. And then, of course, my favorite thing on the 3 3/4 inch figures, rocker ankles. So rocker ankles all the way down to the bottom. You can position him any way you want. You're not restricted to have him standing on an angle on the side like he's bow-legged or injured. He can stand perfectly. So there's one more look at Thrawn from the front. We'll look at him underneath here on his feet. You can see his boots. He's got his 2 little foot pegs on there. The foot pegs they keep getting smaller and smaller. They're really hard to get on the stands, and some of them aren't deep enough. They're very shallow, and I think that's more to do with the fact that they're giving us rocker ankles. But it'd be nice if we could have some sort of normalcy there where we can utilize them and not have to use, sticky tack or put them on the shelf and hope they don't fall. But that's probably my only issue with the rocker ankle part, but I don't want it to go away. Definitely like the rocker ankles. So one more look at the front. Let's take a look at the side view of Thrawn. Let's take a look at him there from the back. Okay. You can see the nice wrinkles on his outfit, on his jacket there. And you can see it's just a very nice super version, ultimate version of Grand Admiral Thrawn that we got from the vintage collection. All right, last but not least, we're going to take a look at the Black Series version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. So with the Black Series in 2017, Hasbro first released a San Diego Comic-Con version of Grand Admiral Thrawn. He came out in a larger packaging, and he, of course, Grand Admiral Thrawn, whether you know this or not, he's a big collector. Not an action figure collector, but he likes to collect antiques or stuff from places that he's conquered or places that he has interest in. So that figure came with some added accessories, but he would get a regular release. That's the one that I have here. Retail release, that's this character over here. And you can see he's definitely got the outfit, the costume from Rebels. But again, he's a more realistic version of the character. And I love this character. This character now, who is, 6-7 years old, sculpt-wise, stands the test of time. He's a very, very nice sculpt. We bring him up close there so you can see his head. He definitely has that menacing, serious look to his face. He's got the little black pupils inside there, and he's almost got that smirk / stare, like he's thinking about how he's going to defeat his next opponent. Always scheming, always planning. A military genius, right? So that's what his head looks like all the way around. It is on a ball joint, so we can turn that, side to side. Okay, we can go down, we can go up, we can do whatever you want with this figure. He can pose him in many different ways. He does have the ball joint here at the shoulders, so you can have that full motion all the way up there, and it's nice and solid at the elbows as well. Okay, and of course at the wrists there, you can turn them side to side, and he does have articulation on the wrist there, so you can have him holding his blaster in many different poses or both hands, whatever you need. So that's articulation on the arms. As we work our way down here, we can see he does have articulation here at the waist, nice and snug on mine. And of course, you can do a bit of an ab crunch downward, and you can do a bit forward there as well. Not much. Imperial officer body, right? He does have a working holster over here that's attached to his bottom part of his jacket. The gun does come out, so you can see the gun is just a larger version of the one that we saw from our smaller characters there, from our 3 3/4 inch characters. So that fits nicely into his holster there, if he's not holding it in his hand. And as we work our way down here, you can see that he does have the bottom part of the jacket. It's got the slits on the side, so very reminiscent of that vintage collection one that we've looked at already. This one did come out first though. Articulation of the legs, of course, ball joints there at the hips. As far as the knees here, you have nice articulation there at the knees. You can do many different poses with them, and of course, nicely painted boots. And as we work our way down over here at the ankles, we have ankle articulation back and forth. And of course, our beloved rocker ankles that's standard on Black Series figures. So one more look at Thrawn there from the front. We took a look underneath here. We can see on the bottom, it does say Hasbro China Lucasfilm Limited on one foot, and I'm looking for a year. I don't have a year here on the back, on the bottom of the feet, unfortunately, but you can see the nice little foot pegs. And that's what Thrawn looks like from the side. And then that's what Thrawn looks like from the back. So that's our Grand Admiral Thrawn from the Black Series. He would get re-released one more time in 2020 as part of the archive line. And he has been pipelined, of course, for an Ahsoka version. So I'm sure that's going to come out in both Black Series first and then afterwards in the Vintage Collection, just so that they can maximize all the characters that are showing up on screen. Once again, if you've gotten this far, I appreciate that you've taken the time to watch it. I enjoy doing these reviews. If you like that as well, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next video. Take care.